Who was a worse influence in the 1990s? Was it Oasis or the Spice Girls? Most people would undoubtedly say Oasis. Many people at the time and today saw them as nothing more than loudmouth yobs. Whereas the Spice Girls have historically been seen to be all about female empowerment, being true to yourself, and loads of other quite positive qualities. Everything I say in this video is only my opinion, and of course I am quite biased because I'm a massive Oasis fan. But in the 90s as a teenager and now as an adult, I've always found that there was something a little bit dodgy, a little bit sinister about the Spice Girls and the things they sang about to their target audience. I haven't really listened to teen pop music for a very long time, but back in the 90s and in the noughties, there was this convention, particularly among manufactured groups, of modelling really inappropriate stuff to underage kids who were far too young for that shit. And this was also especially prevalent in manufactured bands who also used a professional songwriting team. Do you remember as kids when you would get into arguments and you bicker, there would always be one kid who would call another kid stupid or ugly or fat and then immediately afterwards go, "Only joking," as if that somehow took away the initial insult. That little "only joking" loophole never took away the insult. The insulted kid would always remember it because it had already lodged up there. Manufactured pop artists would do a similar thing, but they would do it with sexual innuendo. They would say something that sounded really dodgy, that would immediately take root up here, and then they would follow it up with a little disclaimer as if to say, "We didn't really mean that, nudge nudge wink wink." I'd like to show you what I mean with a really blatant example of this innuendo disclaimer trick from 2002 by Avril Lavigne. Her first album, Let Go, was recorded and released in the States, where she was then resident. She was 17 years old and legally below the age of consent in the US. Track 9 on that album is a song called Things I'll Never Say, and it's just an onslaught of double entendres and innuendos being sung by a then underage kid.
If I can say what I want to say, I say I want to blow you away, be with you every night. Am I squeezing you too tight? If I can say what I want to see go down on one knee, marry me today.
Did you notice the massive pauses in what she sang there? She sings, "I want to blow you away," but leaves a massive pause after the word you. She says, "I want to see you go down on one knee," and then leaves a massive pause after the word down. Both of these moments are in there intentionally. They were planned by the songwriters, and she was underage. How dark is that? We've had the innuendo, and it's immediately followed by the disclaimer. But just like a kid insulting another kid and then going, "Only joking," it's too late. It's a mind game. It's a trick. And it's a dark and creepy little trick as well, because it's designed to subconsciously sexualize a singer. And remember, not only was Avril Lavigne underage when this song was written, recorded and released, at that time, a vast part of her fan base were girls the same age and often younger. And that brings me directly on to the Spice Girls. The Spice Girls were a manufactured band. They were put together by Chris and Bob Herbert of Heart Management. And according to the guy who did the auditioning, none of them were accomplished vocalists, and Posh Spice, for example, only got 5 out of 10 for her singing at the audition, and yet she still passed. Literally all of them had to be sent to a vocal coach to be shown how to sing properly. And just listen to what that vocal coach said about their abilities. They all had their own individual vocal faults. Each one of them had defects. They weren't trained properly. Not one of them was a vocal diva. Geri had the hardest part because singing wasn't the most natural thing for her to do. Neither was it natural for Victoria to sing. She wasn't a natural singer. And so, knowing that they weren't recruited primarily for their singing talent, you have to ask the question, on what basis did they pass the audition then? We also know they weren't signed for any innate songwriting ability because, in the same way, they were sent to a songwriting team, Stannard and Rowe, to help them actually compose their songs. With this professional songwriting team, the freshly manufactured Spice Girls wrote their first single, Wannabe. And this song in particular is the one that I want to focus in on in this video. But because we are discussing some slightly dark, sinister stuff here, I'd like to briefly lighten the mood by letting the almighty Peter O'Toole read the lyrics for me. This is from TFI Friday in October 1996.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. Tell me what you want. Really, really want. I wanna, really, really, really wanna. Zigga, zigga,
Wannabe is full of innuendos, packed to the gills with sex stuff, both hidden and blatant. The chorus says, if you want to be a Spice Girls lover, you also have to get with her friends. Now in this song, get with means sex. So they're literally saying, if you want to be a Spice Girls lover, you have to bed all of them. Don't believe me? Here's a quote from the Mirror. For those of you who were innocent school kids singing along to the lyrics at that time, you probably should have had your mouth washed out with soap because it turns out they had a filthy meaning. An unnamed source who helped pen the track in '95 has lifted the lid on what Mel B, Geri Halliwell, Emma Bunton, Victoria Beckham and Mel C were really trying to say. And it's apparently all about how they like their sex. Let's have a look at the rap at the end of the song, which confirms this interpretation. It first talks about Emma Bunton, Baby Spice, in a line, again, packed with innuendo. We then come to the bit about Geri Halliwell, which is Ginger Spice, and Mel C, Sporty Spice. Now when you listen to this line in the song, it's a bit of a mind trick. It sounds like they just leave that line hanging. It sounds like they don't finish it. But they actually do. They finish it with the first letter of the next line. Listen to this from the Mirror. According to the Insider, the G like MC part was about Geri and Mel C liking a bit of the old rumpy pumpy after taking ecstasy. So that line actually finishes with the letter E for ecstasy. It's a word trick. It overlaps with the start of the next line. It's that same old innuendo disclaimer trick. They rolled the E into the first word of the next line. And this next line is about Victoria Beckham, Posh Spice. Again, kind of deniable innuendo which becomes visible when you change the spelling of just one word. And then, at the end, we get the most blatant lyric of all of them. So, we've had the Spice Girls saying, if you want to be the lover of one of us, you have to bed all of us. And then they finish the song with the instructions on how to do that. The song just being taken out of context, that's actually quite funny. But the massive problem I have with all the sex stuff in Spice Girls songs is this. While they were adored by people of all ages, their primary target market, the group they were advertised at the heaviest, and the group that saw them as role models mainly, was underage teens and preteen girls. In the 1996 article, Wannabe and Their Gang, the Times defined the Spice Girls' music as a frothy confection for the kids, and their main audience as prepubescent girls. And just look at how hard they marketed themselves to youngsters young lasses in particular. They were adults, but they dressed like 12-year-olds and seemed to target that age group directly. There were lines of Spice Girl Barbie doll type things, and not just one line, but loads. An American collector who started accumulating them at age 13 now has over 300 different Spice Girls dolls, showing the level of demand there was and indicating the age group that was into them. Generally speaking, what age group plays with dolls? It's not normally people over the age of consent, is it? The Spice Girls were role models for underage kids. They dressed like them, they produced Barbie dolls for them, and they sang sexual innuendos to them. Just imagine if you had an entertainer show up at your young child's birthday party who started singing songs packed with double entendres to them. How would you feel? And this is not the only Spice Girls song like this. Another single from the same album is called Two Become One, and it's just openly talking about sex again. Just take a look at this video of the Spice Girls live. They bring a young underage girl up on stage, and just look at what they're getting her to sing. This is the Spice Girls performing at Earl's Court, and you can see the full video of this on YouTube. And I've put on the screen the lyric that's being sung at each of these moments. What do you think put it on means in this context? And how old do you think that kid is? When was it ever okay to have little kids singing along to words like that? I remember in my days of playing live a lot with a covers band, we would play a lot of pubs and clubs, but we would also play at weddings. Typically, before, in between, and after our two sets, a DJ would play, and he would often play Wannabe by the Spice Girls. I'll honestly never forget the shock and embarrassment I felt at hearing this song come on and seeing a big crowd of 9-year-old girls jump up and start gyrating all over the dance floor to it. I remember looking around the room horrified and going, am I the only one fucking seeing this? But the truth is, it's one of those songs we've just been desensitised to through sheer overexposure. As I was scripting this video, I hit a point where I realised I needed a bit of female input. I began thinking, am I being a bit kind of overprotective dad here? I might be missing something. I'm a bloke, I had a very blokey upbringing, so I realised I needed a woman's perspective. So I sat down with Vicky, my lovely other half, and I told her what I was writing about. We're the same age, and I said, look, am I just getting the wrong end of the stick here? And she responded by saying, not at all. She told me that as a young teenage lass herself, when the Spice Girls came out, she and her friends all knew that Wannabe was all about sex. And they were inspired by the Spice Girls to put together their own all-female group, which is great, but they were also inspired to fill their songs with sexual innuendos, just like their idols, while they were way underage, which is frigging awful. And after that conversation with Vicky, my mind was made up to do this video. They're adults, they can sing about whatever they want, but marketing sexual songs at kids? That shit is dark, man. I also discovered there's another song on that same Spice Girls album called Naked that literally talks about being a child in a sexual context. I'm not going to read the lyrics out, but you can just see them on the screen. What kind of mind comes up with lyrics like this for what the Times calls prepubescent girls to learn by heart and sing along to? But wait, I hear someone cry. You go on about Oasis all the time, and they were bad influences, constantly praising drugs and violence in the press. Okay, it's a fair cop. Oasis behaved like yobs sometimes. I do put my hands up and say I never cared for the Oasis druggy stuff, and I still don't. But I also know that the Gallagher brothers grew up in an incredibly abusive situation. they turned to drugs while very young, probably as a kind of escape. So, on some tragic level, I kinda get it. And you know, let's be honest, a rock band praising drugs is not quite on the same level as marketing sexual innuendos at children. In 1997, Britpop reached its peak, and the Spice Girls are credited with playing a large part in causing its decline. Britpop and lad culture were written off as loutish rubbish, and the girl power movement was considered a new, cleaner, more wholesome musical culture. What an irony it is then that the last truly massive single Oasis released was Do You Know What I Mean? A song I believe to be about escaping an abusive situation as a child. Whereas the best known Spice Girls song is Wannabe, which in my opinion sets an incredibly bad example to young kids. So, in reality, which was the more wholesome musical movement? This is yet another reason to reject manufactured bands who have their songs written for them by songwriting teams. This is yet another reason to support homegrown artists, grassroots musicians who write and perform their own music. Real singer-songwriters will always have the edge over stuff created in a strategy meeting in a boardroom, because musicians like the ones in the Britpop movement, generally speaking, were only in it for one reason: to create great music. They weren't trying to play mind games with the lyrics. They didn't have a team of psychologists and lawyers on hand when they wrote the lyrics. They weren't trying to generate the desired emotional reaction in a target demographic. None of that twisted shit. Homegrown musicians, grassroots songwriters, they are about the music. They are about expressing something. They are about serving the song. Manufactured music is mostly about manipulation, mind games, and basically just lining the pockets of wankers in a boardroom somewhere. And that's why we need proper bands back. That's why we need a resurgence of rock and roll. We need ordinary people with a guitar, with no hidden agenda, no analysts to report to, not serving money, not playing mind games, but serving one thing and one thing only: the music.